Welcome to A Chapter a Day. Support our channel and subscribe today. Most people think money is about earning. Get a job. Work harder. Climb higher. But if that were true, the world's highest earners would automatically become the wealthiest people. And they don't. Some surgeons make millions and stay financially fragile. Some entrepreneurs fail 3 times and eventually control billions. So the real question isn't, how much money do people earn? The real question is, what game are they playing? Because money operates inside hidden systems, status systems, risk systems, information systems, power systems, and most people are unknowingly playing the wrong game entirely. They optimize for salary when wealth builders optimize for ownership. They pursue stability when wealth creators pursue leverage. They protect reputation when power players pursue influence. So two people can appear to be working equally hard. But one is climbing a ladder, while the other is quietly building the building itself. This audiobook is not about motivation. It is about seeing the invisible structures behind money, the psychological time horizons, the silent rules of power, the hidden incentives shaping behavior. Because once you understand these patterns, something strange happens. You start noticing wealth everywhere. In decisions, in systems, in relationships. And the moment you start seeing those patterns, you stop chasing money. And you begin positioning yourself where money naturally flows. Chapter 1. Most people are playing the wrong money game. There is a quiet assumption that shapes the financial lives of millions of people. It is rarely spoken out loud. It is rarely questioned. And yet it directs countless decisions about careers, opportunities, and risk. The assumption is simple. If you work hard, if you climb steadily, if you make responsible choices, then eventually, wealth will appear. It sounds logical. It sounds fair. It sounds like the correct way to build a life. But something strange happens when you look closely at the world. Some of the hardest working people remain financially fragile for decades. And some individuals, who appear to take enormous risks, quietly accumulate massive wealth over time. This contradiction confuses people, because they believe everyone is playing the same financial game. But they are not. Most people are climbing income ladders. Wealth builders are constructing economic systems. And the difference between those two approaches quietly shapes the direction of entire lives. Imagine 2 people starting their careers at the same age. Both are intelligent. Both are disciplined. Both are willing to work hard. The first person follows the path that society often praises. They pursue education. They develop specialized skills. They find a stable job. Then they begin climbing. Promotion after promotion. Raise after raise. Their financial progress becomes tied directly to effort and advancement. More responsibility leads to more income. More experience leads to a higher salary. From the outside, this path looks successful. And in many ways, it is. But there is an invisible structure behind this strategy. A structure that quietly limits how wealth can grow. Because the ladder model contains a hidden rule. Your financial progress is tied to your personal output. Your hours. Your performance, your availability, your energy. In other words, your income expands only as far as your effort can expand. Now consider a different path. Instead of focusing only on advancement, another person begins asking different questions. Not simply, how can I earn more? But something much more strategic. What can I build that continues producing value even when I am not present? This question changes everything. because it shifts attention away from effort and toward structure, toward ownership, toward assets, toward systems that continue functioning without constant personal involvement. At first, this approach can look slower. A small investment, a small project, a small piece of ownership. Nothing dramatic, nothing impressive. And in the beginning, these systems often grow more slowly than salary increases, which is exactly why many people ignore them. But something powerful happens as time passes. Systems compound, ownership compounds, position compounds, and gradually, a different financial trajectory begins to appear. Because wealth does not expand in the same way income does. Income grows in straight lines. Wealth grows through structure. And this leads to one of the most important ideas in this entire audiobook. Listen closely to this sentence. Because once you understand it, you begin noticing it everywhere. Income depends on effort. Wealth depends on position. Income is something you generate. Wealth is something your position produces. Employees generate income. Owners position themselves for expanding value. Investors position themselves for compounding. Creators position themselves for distribution. And this is why two people can work equally hard, yet experience completely different financial outcomes. One is producing value directly. The other is positioned where value multiplies. When people begin seeing this pattern, they often experience a strange realization. They realize they have spent years, sometimes decades, optimizing their ability to climb a ladder, without ever questioning the ladder itself. Climbing efficiently is not the same thing as choosing the right structure. And this brings us to another idea that sounds responsible on the surface, but quietly shapes financial outcomes in powerful ways. Stability. From an early age, many people are taught to pursue stability above all else. Choose the safe option. Choose the reliable income. Choose the path with the fewest unknowns. And in many situations, this advice is well-intentioned. Stability reduces immediate danger. It creates order. It helps people survive unpredictable circumstances. But financial life does not only unfold in the short term. It unfolds across decades. And over long periods of time, stability carries a hidden cost. It quietly limits exposure to asymmetric opportunity. Now that phrase may sound technical, but the idea behind it is simple. An asymmetric opportunity is a situation where the potential upside is dramatically larger than the potential downside. Consider something like investing in a growing company, or building intellectual property, or creating something that can scale to millions of people. In the beginning, these situations often appear uncertain. They contain volatility. They contain risk. They contain the possibility of failure. And that uncertainty causes many people to walk away. Because the human mind naturally prefers predictability. It prefers situations where the outcome feels controlled. But the same environments that feel unpredictable are often the environments where enormous expansion occurs. This is the paradox. Stability feels responsible in the moment. But long-term wealth often emerges from environments that contain uncertainty. Consider two financial paths. The first path is stable employment. Every month, the same predictable income arrives. The same schedule. The same expectations. It feels safe. It feels organized. But it also contains an invisible ceiling. Income increases slowly, gradually, incrementally. Now imagine a different structure. Ownership. Ownership does not always provide immediate stability. Income may fluctuate. Progress may appear uneven. Scalability. One decision can influence thousands of outcomes. One asset can grow beyond the effort required to create it. One piece of intellectual property can generate value for years. And over long time horizons, scalability transforms financial reality. This does not mean stability is wrong. Stability protects. But stability and wealth creation operate according to different rules. Stability protects the present. Ownership expands the future. Years may pass before results become obvious. But ownership contains something stability rarely offers. Scalability. The individuals who eventually accumulate significant wealth understand this balance. They create stability where it matters. But they also position themselves where expansion is possible. Because they understand something subtle about the financial world. The largest rewards rarely exist inside perfectly predictable environments. They exist where uncertainty and opportunity intersect. Now pause for a moment. Think about your own financial decisions. Think about the path you've followed so far. The opportunities you accepted. The ones you declined. The risks you avoided. Ask yourself something honestly. Have you ever noticed how the safest path often leads to the most predictable outcome? The safest career path produces predictable income. The safest investments produce predictable returns. The safest decisions produce predictable lives. And again, there is nothing inherently wrong with predictability. But predictability rarely produces extraordinary outcomes. This realization creates an interesting moment. Because people begin noticing something about their own thinking. They realize they have often been optimizing for safety rather than possibility. For stability rather than position. For short-term clarity rather than long-term expansion. And the moment that shift happens, your attention begins changing. You start noticing different kinds of opportunities. Not just opportunities that increase income this year, but opportunities that change your position within systems. Because position determines leverage. Leverage determines scale. And scale determines how wealth actually expands. But there is another factor quietly shaping these decisions. A factor that separates wealthy thinkers from everyone else. And surprisingly, it is not intelligence. It is not education. It is not even risk tolerance. The deepest difference lies in something far more subtle. Something that influences nearly every financial decision people make. Time. The time horizon someone uses when thinking about money. Some people think about money in weeks. Others think in months. But the individuals who build extraordinary wealth operate on a completely different timeline. They make decisions based on years. Sometimes decades. And once you begin understanding how wealthy thinkers relate to time, you begin to see why their choices look so different from everyone else's. You've begun to question the ladder. Now it's time to examine the clock. You mastered the difference between climbing and positioning. Now let's explore the deeper force shaping financial outcomes across entire lifetimes. We move now into the next idea. Wealth is built on a completely different time scale. Chapter 2. Wealth is built on a different time scale. Something subtle begins to change the moment people stop asking how to earn more money this year, and start asking what their financial life will look like 20 years from now. This shift may sound small. Just a different question. Just a slightly longer timeline. But in reality, it is one of the deepest psychological differences between people who accumulate wealth and people who spend their lives chasing it. Because money behaves very differently depending on the time horizon you use to make decisions. And most people, without realizing it, are operating on extremely short financial timelines. They think about the next paycheck, the next bill, the next raise, the next 12 months. Their financial world is organized around cycles that repeat quickly and predictably. Monthly income, monthly expenses, monthly obligations. And when financial thinking is confined to short cycles, decisions naturally prioritize immediate results. The mind begins asking questions like, what pays more this year? What job increases my income right now? What choice produces the fastest reward? These questions feel practical. They feel responsible. But they also quietly trap people inside short-term financial thinking. Because when the timeline is short, the available strategies become limited. You can work more hours. You can negotiate a slightly higher salary. You can find a slightly better paying position. But every solution remains connected to the same underlying structure. Effort, time, immediate compensation. Now imagine someone who organizes their financial thinking differently. Instead of focusing on what improves the next 12 months, they begin asking a different question entirely. What decisions today will still be paying me 20 years from now? Notice how different that question feels. Suddenly the mind begins evaluating opportunities in a completely different way. Instead of asking what pays more immediately, the focus shifts to what compounds, what grows, what expands quietly over time. A short-term thinker asks, what pays more this year? A long-term thinker asks, what compounds for 20 years? And that simple shift in perspective transforms everything. Because most of the mechanisms that generate real wealth operate slowly in the beginning. So slowly, in fact, that they often appear insignificant at first. A small investment, a piece of ownership, a project that grows gradually, an idea that takes years to gain momentum. In the early stages, these things rarely look impressive. In fact, compared to a reliable salary increase, they often appear inefficient. Which is exactly why many people abandon them too soon. They cannot see the future impact because their timeline is too short. This is where psychology begins to interfere with financial growth. The human brain evolved for immediate survival. For thousands of years, survival depended on quick reactions. Finding food today, avoiding danger today, securing shelter today. Immediate threats demanded immediate responses. And because of that evolutionary history, the brain is naturally wired to prioritize short-term outcomes. It rewards actions that produce immediate results. It becomes impatient with processes that unfold slowly, which creates a fascinating problem when dealing with something like compounding. Because compounding behaves in a way the human brain struggles to understand. At the beginning, it moves quietly, almost invisibly. A small investment grows slightly. A system produces small returns. Progress appears slow, sometimes even disappointing. Years pass, and the results still appear modest. This stage often feels discouraging, because the effort invested seems disproportionate to the reward received. But something important is happening beneath the surface. The structure is forming. The foundation is expanding. And eventually, the curve begins to bend. Gradually at first, then faster, and then suddenly the growth becomes dramatic. This is the strange nature of compounding. For long periods of time it appears unimpressive. Then, almost unexpectedly, it becomes powerful. Which is why one of the most important phrases in this entire audiobook is very simple. Wealth grows slowly, then suddenly appears obvious. When people look at wealthy individuals from the outside, they often assume success happened quickly. They see the visible result. The company that suddenly exploded in value. The investment that multiplied. The asset that produced enormous returns. What they rarely see is the quiet decade that came before it. The years when progress was barely noticeable. The time when patience was required. The stage when most people would have walked away. Because from a short-term perspective, the progress looked insignificant. This is the compounding blind spot. The mind struggles to stay committed to processes that reward patience instead of immediacy, which is why wealth often accumulates in the hands of individuals who develop an unusual relationship with time. They become comfortable operating on timelines that others find frustrating. They invest in ideas that may take years to mature. They build systems that may take a decade to reach full power. And while others focus on short bursts of progress, they quietly allow compounding to do its work. This difference in time perception creates an enormous advantage. Because most financial environments reward patience more than speed. Markets reward long-term investors. Businesses reward long-term builders. Reputation rewards long-term consistency. But none of these rewards appear quickly. They require time to accumulate, which is exactly why they remain inaccessible to people operating on short timelines. Now pause for a moment and reflect on your own financial decisions. Think about the choices you have made over the past few years. How often were those decisions influenced by immediate outcomes? Immediate income, immediate comfort, immediate certainty. And how often were those decisions guided by a much longer vision? A 10-year vision, a 20-year vision. Because the moment someone begins thinking on longer timelines, something fascinating happens. Opportunities that once appeared unattractive suddenly become valuable. Slow growth becomes acceptable. Temporary uncertainty becomes manageable. And patience becomes a strategic advantage. The mind begins to recognize that many of the most powerful financial mechanisms require time to unfold. Ownership requires time. Reputation requires time. Compounding requires time. Systems require time. Which means the people willing to think decades ahead often gain access to opportunities that others overlook. But there is an important nuance here. Time alone does not create wealth. Simply waiting does not create expansion. Patience without strategy produces very little. Because wealth does not come from time by itself. It comes from time combined with position. Position determines what compounds. Position determines what scales. Position determines where value accumulates. Two people can wait the same amount of time. One becomes wealthier. The other does not. The difference is not patience. The difference is what they were positioned in during that time. Were they positioned in assets that grow? Were they positioned in systems that expand? Were they positioned in environments where value multiplies? Or were they positioned inside structures where growth remains limited no matter how long they wait? This realization brings us back to the central theme of this audiobook. Wealth is not simply earned. It is engineered through position, systems, and perspective. And time is the amplifier that allows those systems to reveal their true power. But time alone is not enough. Because once you understand long-term thinking, another deeper layer of wealth psychology begins to emerge. It is a force that accelerates outcomes far beyond what effort alone can produce. A force that allows one decision to influence thousands of results. A force that transforms small actions into massive outcomes. That force is leverage. And the people who truly understand wealth are rarely focused only on working harder. They are focused on gaining access to leverage. Because leverage allows time and position to multiply. You have now begun to understand the hidden role time plays in financial growth. You've seen why short timelines trap people inside predictable outcomes. You've seen why patience allows compounding to unfold. But patience alone cannot produce extraordinary results. time magnifies what already exists. So the real question becomes this: what exactly should time be magnifying? That answer leads us directly into the next layer of wealth psychology. You've learned to extend your timeline. Now it's time to multiply your influence. Chapter 3: Power creates money faster than effort. There is a moment in almost every financial journey when a person begins to notice something strange about the world. They look around and see people working incredibly hard. Long hours, high stress, constant effort, and yet their financial progress moves slowly, sometimes painfully slowly. Then they notice something else. Certain individuals seem to produce enormous financial outcomes without working proportionally harder. In fact, from the outside, they sometimes appear to work less. Their time seems flexible. Their decisions seem strategic rather than frantic. Their effort appears focused rather than constant. This observation creates confusion, because from childhood, most people are taught a very simple rule: work harder, and you will earn more. And in many environments, that rule appears to function. If you work harder in a traditional job, you may receive a raise. If you perform well, you may receive a promotion. Effort produces results. But effort contains a limitation that becomes increasingly visible over time. Effort does not scale easily. There are only so many hours in a day. Only so much energy a person can exert. Only so many problems one mind can solve at once. Which means effort, by its nature, creates a ceiling. You can increase effort, but eventually you reach the limits of time. And the moment time becomes the bottleneck, growth slows dramatically. This is where the psychology of wealth begins to diverge. Because the individuals who eventually accumulate large amounts of wealth are rarely focused on maximizing effort alone. Instead, they become obsessed with something else: influence. Influence behaves very differently from effort. Effort expands linearly. Influence expands exponentially. When a person relies only on effort, every result requires direct involvement. Every dollar requires action. Every outcome requires time. But when someone builds influence, their actions begin affecting outcomes far beyond their immediate presence. One decision begins influencing many results. One idea begins reaching thousands of people. One system begins generating value continuously. This is the moment financial momentum begins to change. To understand this difference clearly, consider two simple examples. Imagine a freelancer who sells specialized services. Their expertise may be valuable. Their skill may be rare. Their work may even be exceptional. But the structure of their income is tied directly to time. They sell hours. Every project requires effort. Every client requires attention. Their income grows only when their hours increase or their rate increases. Now imagine a different structure. A platform owner. A platform owner does not sell hours. They sell access. Access to users. Access to tools. Access to a system where value flows continuously. One platform can serve millions of people simultaneously. One system can generate income every hour of the day without requiring constant direct effort. This difference between selling hours and selling access illustrates one of the deepest principles in wealth creation. Effort scales poorly. Influence scales infinitely. The moment someone begins designing systems that extend their influence beyond their direct labor, financial outcomes begin changing dramatically. This is why certain types of individuals appear repeatedly among the wealthiest groups in the world. Founders, investors, platform builders, creators who control distribution. These individuals are not simply working harder. They are operating inside structures where influence multiplies outcomes. But influence rarely appears randomly. It usually emerges from something more fundamental. Control. Control over systems. Control over distribution. Control over information. Control over networks. When someone controls a system, they control how value moves through that system. When someone controls distribution, they control how ideas, products, or services reach the world. When someone controls information, they influence how decisions are made. And when someone controls networks, they shape the flow of opportunity itself. These forms of control create powerful economic leverage. Because every action taken within those systems affects thousands, sometimes millions, of outcomes. Think about a software platform. The creator writes the code once, but that code may serve millions of users. Think about a successful investor. They deploy capital once, but the value of that capital compounds over time across multiple ventures. Think about a media platform. A single piece of content can reach millions of people simultaneously. In each of these examples, the individual is no longer operating purely through effort. They are operating through influence. And influence is the real accelerator of wealth. Now, this idea often surprises people, because influence does not always look like traditional power. It does not always involve authority. It does not always involve titles or status. Sometimes influence is subtle. A person who controls an important network. A person who distributes valuable information. A person who creates a system others rely on. These individuals quietly shape economic outcomes without appearing visibly powerful. But the effect is undeniable. Influence multiplies effort. Influence expands reach. Influence amplifies decisions. And over time, influence produces results that effort alone could never achieve. Now pause for a moment and consider your own financial life. Think about the way you currently create value. Think about the structure behind your income. Ask yourself something honestly. Are you primarily selling effort? Or are you building influence? There is no judgment in this question. Everyone begins by selling effort. Effort builds skills. Effort creates experience. Effort develops credibility. But eventually a decision appears. Continue trading time for income. Or begin building structures where influence can expand beyond personal effort. The people who eventually accumulate wealth recognize this turning point. They begin shifting their focus. Instead of asking, "How can I work harder?" they begin asking, "How can my decisions affect more outcomes? How can my work reach more people? How can my systems operate without constant involvement?" And slowly, their attention shifts from effort toward influence, from activity toward structure, from labor toward leverage. This shift rarely happens overnight. It unfolds gradually. A small investment in ownership. A small piece of intellectual property. A small system that operates independently. But each step expands influence. And each expansion creates new possibilities. Yet influence itself is not the deepest layer of this story. Because influence does not appear randomly. It emerges from something many people misunderstand. Something that shapes opportunity long before money enters the picture. That force is status. Not the kind of status most people think about. Not luxury. Not appearance. But a much deeper form of status that quietly determines who receives trust, attention, and access. And once you begin understanding how status operates, another invisible layer of wealth becomes clear. You have now seen the difference between effort and influence. You've seen why influence scales while effort eventually reaches its limits. You've seen how control over systems, information, and networks accelerates financial outcomes. But influence itself grows from a deeper social force. A force that shapes who people listen to, who they trust, and who receives opportunities first. You've learned how power multiplies money. Now it's time to understand the social engine behind that power. Chapter 4. Money is a status game disguised as an economic game. There is a layer of financial reality that most people never fully see. From the outside, money appears to be purely economic. People earn income. People invest capital. Businesses produce products. Markets determine prices. Everything seems logical and mechanical. Supply and demand. Risk and reward. Buy and sell. But if you observe closely, if you look beneath the surface of how opportunities actually move through the world, you begin to notice something unexpected. Money rarely moves only through economics. It moves through people. And people are not purely economic creatures. They are social creatures. They care about reputation. They care about belonging. They care about hierarchy. They care about something that has quietly shaped human behavior for thousands of years. Status. Status is one of the most powerful forces influencing human decisions. It determines who people trust, who they listen to, who they follow, and most importantly, who they open doors for. When people think about wealth, they often imagine money as the starting point. But in many situations, money is not the starting point. Access is the starting point. And access is often determined by status. Consider how opportunities actually appear in the world. A new business opportunity emerges. A partnership becomes available. An investment opportunity is introduced. A high-impact collaboration begins forming. Does this opportunity appear equally to everyone? Of course not. Opportunities rarely appear randomly. They travel through networks, through trust, through reputation, through status hierarchies that exist inside every professional environment. This means something subtle but incredibly important. Before money flows, attention flows. Before investment flows, trust flows. Before opportunity flows, status determines direction. This is why two people with similar skills and intelligence can experience dramatically different financial trajectories. One person consistently receives introductions. Opportunities arrive through conversations. Doors open through relationships. The other person struggles to even see those opportunities. Not because they are incapable, but because they are positioned differently within the social structure surrounding money. Status determines visibility. Visibility determines opportunity. Opportunity determines wealth. Which means wealth is often the final result of something that began much earlier in the chain. The social dynamics of trust. Now, when many people hear the word status, they imagine something superficial. Luxury, fame, expensive lifestyles. But that is not the type of status we are talking about here. That is visible status. And visible status is often misleading. The status that shapes wealth operates much more quietly. It lives inside reputation, inside credibility, inside the subtle signals people send about competence, reliability, and insight. In other words, status often functions as an invisible currency, a form of value that moves through social networks long before money enters the picture. Think about reputation. A strong reputation allows people to trust you before they fully know you. Think about attention. Attention determines which voices people listen to and which ideas spread. Think about credibility. Credibility signals that someone has knowledge worth considering. These three forces, reputation, attention, and credibility, are forms of social capital. They are not money, but they often convert into money later. A respected reputation attracts partnerships. Attention attracts opportunity. Credibility attracts investment. And over time, these social currencies transform into economic outcomes. Now here is where the psychology becomes particularly interesting. Most people instinctively want status. Humans naturally seek recognition and approval. But the way most people pursue status often leads them in the wrong direction financially. Instead of building status capital, they purchase status signals. A status signal is something that creates the appearance of success. Luxury items, expensive lifestyles, visible displays of wealth. These signals can create the impression of status in the short term, but they often do not produce real influence. And influence is what ultimately converts social standing into economic opportunity. This creates a fascinating paradox. The people most obsessed with looking wealthy are often the ones who remain financially fragile, because they are using resources to purchase appearances, while wealth builders are using resources to build assets, credibility, and influence. One group spends money to signal status. The other group builds structures that quietly produce it. And over time, this difference compounds, because status signals disappear the moment spending stops. But status capital grows stronger as reputation and influence expand. Which leads us to a phrase worth remembering. Real wealth buys freedom. Fake wealth buys appearances. Freedom allows people to choose how they spend their time. Freedom allows people to pursue long-term opportunities. Freedom allows people to make decisions without immediate financial pressure. Appearances, on the other hand, require constant maintenance. They demand continuous spending. They create pressure to sustain an image rather than build substance. And eventually, the difference becomes obvious. One path creates influence. The other path creates illusion. The individuals who truly understand the psychology of wealth recognize this early. They invest their energy in building status capital rather than broadcasting status signals. They focus on becoming known for competence, known for reliability, known for valuable ideas, known for creating outcomes others respect. And slowly, something interesting begins to happen. People begin bringing opportunities to them, not because they asked, but because their reputation creates trust. And trust creates access. Remember what we discussed earlier. Access produces wealth. Access to information. Access to people. Access to opportunities that never appear in public markets. When someone becomes trusted within a network, their access expands naturally. And access expands opportunity. Now pause for a moment and reflect on something. Think about the environments where the largest opportunities tend to appear. Inside private conversations. Inside professional networks. Inside groups where trust already exists. These environments are not controlled by money alone. They are controlled by reputation, by credibility, by perceived value, which means wealth often follows people who build strong social capital long before they accumulate financial capital. And once this pattern becomes visible, something else becomes clear. Status is not about impressing strangers. It is about earning trust from the right people. It is about positioning yourself inside environments where opportunity flows. And this realization changes how wealth builders think about their actions. Instead of asking, "How can I look successful?" they ask, "How can I become valuable in environments where opportunity moves?" Instead of chasing attention from everyone, they build credibility with the right networks. Instead of broadcasting success, they quietly build influence. Because influence, when paired with credibility and reputation, becomes a powerful magnet for opportunity. You begin to see why wealth is rarely just about money. It is about positioning within social and economic ecosystems. Money flows through trust. Trust flows through status. Status flows through reputation and value. Once you begin seeing this structure, the world starts looking very different. You notice why certain individuals seem to receive opportunities repeatedly. You notice why certain networks produce extraordinary financial outcomes. And you notice why the pursuit of appearances often leads people further away from the very wealth they seek. You have now seen that money does not move only through economic systems. It moves through social systems, through trust, through reputation, through status capital that quietly determines who receives access to opportunity. But there is another psychological shift that separates wealthy thinkers from everyone else. It involves the way they approach uncertainty. Most people spend their lives searching for guarantees. Guaranteed income, guaranteed outcomes, guaranteed security. But the individuals who eventually build extraordinary wealth understand something different. The environments that contain guarantees rarely contain extraordinary opportunity. And the environments that contain extraordinary opportunity almost always contain uncertainty. You now understand that wealth is deeply connected to social positioning and trust. Now we must explore another powerful idea: why wealthy thinkers are willing to move toward uncertainty while others move away from it. You've learned how status quietly shapes opportunity. Now let's explore the decision-making principle that allows people to capture those opportunities. Chapter 5: Why the Wealthy Seek Asymmetric Risk. If you observe how most people make financial decisions, a pattern begins to appear. People instinctively move toward certainty. Certainty feels safe. Certainty feels responsible. Certainty feels like control. A predictable paycheck. A stable job. An investment that promises slow and steady returns. These things create comfort. And comfort is powerful. The human brain naturally prefers environments where outcomes feel predictable. But there is an important truth about the financial world that many people never fully recognize. The environments that feel the safest are often the environments where growth is the most limited. And the environments that contain the greatest potential for expansion are rarely the ones that feel predictable at the beginning. This is where the thinking of wealth builders begins to diverge from the thinking of the average person. Most people spend their lives trying to eliminate uncertainty. Wealth builders spend their lives learning how to navigate it. But more importantly, they learn how to recognize a very specific type of uncertainty. A type of uncertainty that carries a powerful advantage. Asymmetric risk. Now the phrase may sound technical, but the idea itself is surprisingly simple. An asymmetric opportunity is a situation where the potential upside is dramatically larger than the potential downside. In other words, the possible reward is far greater than the possible loss. This type of opportunity exists in many areas of the financial world. Consider a startup. Most startups fail. Everyone knows this. But occasionally, one succeeds on a massive scale. One company becomes worth billions. One idea reshapes an industry. The downside for an early participant might be limited. Time. A modest investment. Effort. But the upside, if the idea succeeds, can be extraordinary. Now consider equity ownership. An employee may receive a fixed salary, but an owner receives a portion of the value created. If the organization grows significantly, the value of that ownership grows as well. The downside may involve uncertainty in the early stages, but the upside contains almost unlimited potential. Consider investments. A small investment in a growing asset may appear insignificant at first, but if the asset grows exponentially over time, that small position can become dramatically more valuable. Or think about intellectual property. A book, a piece of software, a digital platform. These things require effort to create once, but if they reach a large audience, they can generate value repeatedly for years. In each of these examples, the pattern is the same. Limited downside, massive potential upside. This is the asymmetry principle, and the people who build wealth become extremely skilled at identifying these environments. But here is where the psychological difference appears. Most people avoid these opportunities, not because they are irrational, but because these environments often contain volatility, and volatility feels uncomfortable. Volatility introduces uncertainty. Results may take time. Progress may not follow a straight line. There may be setbacks along the way. And the human brain tends to interpret volatility as danger. Because for most of human history, unpredictability often meant risk to survival. So the brain naturally prefers situations where outcomes appear stable and controlled. Which is why many people instinctively choose paths that offer guaranteed results. Even when those results are modest. Even when those results remain limited for decades. This is the paradox. Volatility often signals opportunity, but volatility also triggers fear. So many people walk away from environments that could produce enormous upside simply because those environments feel uncertain in the beginning. Wealth builders eventually learn to see volatility differently. They understand that volatility is not automatically danger. Sometimes it is simply the early stage of expansion. Think about new technologies. In the beginning, they appear unstable. Markets fluctuate. Opinions differ. Results are unpredictable. But as time passes, successful innovations reshape entire industries. Those who participated early experience extraordinary gains. The same pattern appears in investing. In business creation, in creative industries, the early stages feel uncertain. But uncertainty is often the price of access to asymmetric opportunity. Now this does not mean wealthy individuals behave recklessly. Quite the opposite. They become extremely thoughtful about how they expose themselves to uncertainty. They do not take random risks. They look for situations where the downside is manageable, where failure would not destroy them, but where success could dramatically change their trajectory. This is a very different mindset from the one many people adopt. Instead of asking, "Is this completely safe?" wealth builders ask a more strategic question. What happens if this works? They examine the scale of the potential upside. They examine the long-term impact. And they position themselves where that upside exists. Because when asymmetric opportunities succeed, they often compensate for many smaller failures along the way. One successful investment can offset several unsuccessful ones. One successful venture can transform years of effort. One successful idea can reshape an entire career. And over long time horizons, those asymmetric outcomes begin compounding into extraordinary wealth. Now pause for a moment. Think about the opportunities you have encountered throughout your life. Ideas that seemed interesting. Projects that felt exciting. Investments that appeared promising. But something about them felt uncertain. Something about them felt unfamiliar. So you walked away. Ask yourself something honestly. How many opportunities have you ignored simply because they felt uncertain? How many ideas did you dismiss because they did not offer immediate guarantees? This reflection is not about regret. It is about awareness. Because once you begin recognizing asymmetric opportunities, you start evaluating uncertainty differently. Instead of seeing uncertainty as something to avoid completely, you begin asking whether the potential reward justifies the risk. This shift changes how opportunities appear. You begin noticing possibilities that others overlook. You begin recognizing environments where small positions can produce enormous outcomes. You begin understanding why some individuals appear lucky. They are not simply lucky. They are consistently placing themselves in situations where upside dramatically exceeds downside. But there is another element that makes asymmetric opportunities truly powerful. Something that allows a single decision to produce enormous results. Something that multiplies the impact of time, ownership, and opportunity. Because even asymmetric opportunities can remain limited if they rely solely on individual effort. The real acceleration of wealth occurs when asymmetric opportunity combines with something else. Leverage. Leverage allows small inputs to produce massive outputs. Leverage allows one idea to reach millions of people. Leverage allows one investment to influence entire systems. Leverage allows influence to scale far beyond individual effort. You have now seen why wealthy thinkers move toward asymmetric opportunities while others move toward guarantees. You've seen how volatility often hides expansion. You've seen why uncertainty can be the price of extraordinary upside. But asymmetric opportunity alone is not enough. Opportunity must be multiplied. It must be amplified. It must be placed inside structures that allow small actions to produce massive outcomes. You have learned to recognize asymmetric risk. Now it is time to understand the force that magnifies it. Chapter 6. Leverage is the real engine of wealth. Up to this point, we have uncovered several hidden forces behind wealth. We have seen that wealth is not simply about working harder. We have seen that time magnifies outcomes for those who think in decades instead of months. We have seen that influence scales far beyond individual effort. We have seen how asymmetric opportunities allow small risks to produce massive upside. But there is another force that quietly connects all of these ideas together. A force that turns small actions into enormous outcomes. A force that allows one decision to echo across thousands, sometimes millions, of results. That force is leverage. If effort is the engine of income, leverage is the engine of wealth. Most people spend their financial lives focused almost entirely on effort. They increase their skills. They increase their productivity. They increase the number of hours they work. And while these things can certainly increase income, they rarely create extraordinary financial expansion. Because effort grows in straight lines. You can double your effort, but you cannot multiply your time infinitely. Every person has the same 24 hours in a day, which means effort eventually reaches a ceiling. Leverage removes that ceiling. Leverage allows one unit of effort to produce thousands of units of outcome. It allows small actions to create large consequences. And the individuals who accumulate extraordinary wealth almost always operate inside environments where leverage exists. Now leverage can take many forms. But when we examine the modern economy, most wealth builders rely on four fundamental types of leverage: labor, capital, media, and code. Each of these forms allows a person's influence to extend beyond their personal time and energy. Each of them multiplies the impact of decisions. And the wealthiest individuals often control at least one of them. Let's begin with the oldest form of leverage: labor. Labor leverage occurs when someone organizes the efforts of many people to achieve a larger outcome. Instead of performing every task themselves, they build teams. They create organizations. They coordinate effort. One leader directing 100 skilled individuals can produce outcomes that would be impossible alone. Businesses function this way. Projects expand this way. Large systems require coordinated human effort. Labor leverage has powered economic expansion for centuries. But it also carries complexity. Managing people requires leadership. It requires communication. It requires alignment. Which is why newer forms of leverage have become even more powerful in the modern world. The next form is capital. Capital leverage occurs when money itself becomes a tool that produces more money. Investors understand this principle deeply. Instead of trading time for income, they deploy capital into assets that grow. Those assets may be businesses, real estate, markets, or innovations that expand over time. Capital becomes a silent worker. It operates continuously. It works while the owner sleeps. It works while the owner focuses on new opportunities. And over long time horizons, capital leverage becomes extremely powerful. Because capital compounds. Small amounts of capital can grow dramatically when placed inside expanding systems. But something interesting has happened in recent decades. Two newer forms of leverage have emerged that allow individuals to scale influence faster than ever before. Media and code. Media leverage allows one message to reach enormous audiences. A single video can reach millions. A single idea can spread across the globe. A single piece of content can influence thousands of decisions simultaneously. In the past, controlling media required enormous infrastructure. Printing presses, broadcast networks, distribution channels. But technology has transformed media into something anyone can access. An individual with insight, creativity, and consistency can build influence across enormous audiences. And influence, as we discussed earlier, often converts into opportunity. Opportunity converts into economic outcomes. Media leverage allows one voice to shape conversations far beyond physical proximity. Now consider code. Code is perhaps the most powerful form of leverage ever created. A piece of software can be written once and used by millions. A digital platform can serve users around the world simultaneously. A single application can automate tasks that once required thousands of workers. This is why software founders often accumulate extraordinary wealth. Not because they work harder, but because the systems they create operate at massive scale. Code works continuously. It never becomes tired. It never asks for a salary increase. It simply executes instructions again and again across enormous networks of users. Now when you observe the modern wealth landscape, you begin noticing something fascinating. The individuals who accumulate significant wealth often position themselves around at least one of these leverage points. They organize labor. They deploy capital. They control media. Or they create code. Sometimes they combine several forms at once. A technology founder may create code while building media attention and attracting capital. An investor may deploy capital while building networks of influence. A creator may build media leverage that eventually transforms into ownership and capital. The exact structure may differ, but the pattern remains consistent. Leverage multiplies outcomes. And this multiplication effect explains something that often confuses observers. Why certain individuals appear to create enormous value with relatively small inputs. A software company launches a product that millions use. An investor places capital into an early innovation that transforms an industry. A creator shares ideas that reach audiences across continents. From the outside, these results can appear almost magical. But they are not magic. They are leverage. Leverage allows one decision to ripple outward across massive systems. It allows small actions to produce enormous consequences. And technology has dramatically expanded access to leverage in recent years. Platforms allow creators to reach global audiences. Digital tools allow entrepreneurs to automate complex processes. Networks allow investors to access opportunities that once required exclusive connections. This is what we call invisible leverage. You may not see the system operating, but the system continues producing results. A digital platform processes transactions every second. A video continues reaching viewers long after it is published. An investment continues growing long after the decision to invest was made. These invisible systems quietly generate value, and the individuals who design or control them benefit from their expansion. Now pause for a moment and reflect on your own work. Consider how you currently create value in the world. Is your income primarily tied to direct effort? Or are you beginning to build forms of leverage? Are there systems that continue producing results even when you are not actively working? Are there ideas, assets, or platforms that extend your influence beyond your immediate presence? Because this question sits at the center of wealth creation. Not how hard you work, but how far your work travels. The individuals who eventually accumulate wealth rarely rely on effort alone. They combine effort with leverage. They use effort to create systems. And those systems begin producing outcomes repeatedly. Which brings us back to a phrase worth remembering. Effort creates income. Leverage creates wealth. Effort pays you once. Leverage pays you repeatedly. Effort depends on your presence. Leverage expands your presence beyond your physical limits. Once someone understands this principle, their thinking begins to shift. They stop asking only how to work harder. They begin asking how to design systems. They begin asking how to build assets. They begin asking how their ideas can reach more people. They begin asking how small decisions can produce larger outcomes. And slowly, their financial life moves away from direct labor and towards scalable structures. You have now seen how leverage multiplies the impact of effort. You have seen how labor, capital, media, and code extend influence across massive systems. You have seen how technology allows individuals to build invisible engines of value that continue operating long after the initial work is complete. But there is another powerful force that determines whether leverage opportunities even appear. Because opportunities rarely arrive in isolation. They travel through people, through relationships, through environments where ideas, capital, and talent collide. In other words, wealth rarely grows alone. It grows inside networks. You have learned how leverage multiplies value. Now it is time to understand where leverage opportunities actually come from. Chapter 7. Wealth lives inside networks. There is a moment in a person's financial journey when a surprising realization begins to appear. At first, it feels subtle, almost accidental. You notice that certain opportunities seem to appear repeatedly around the same groups of people, the same circles, the same environments, the same conversations. New businesses begin there. Investments begin there. Partnerships begin there. Ideas begin there. And the people inside those environments seem to encounter possibilities long before the rest of the world even hears about them. From the outside, this can appear unfair. It can appear mysterious. But in reality, It reveals something important about how the world of opportunity actually functions. Opportunities rarely travel through announcements. They travel through people. Most opportunities never reach the public stage. They do not appear in job listings. They do not appear on open marketplaces. They are not advertised widely. Instead, they move quietly through networks of trust. A founder shares an idea with someone they trust. An investor mentions an opportunity to a colleague. A partner introduces two individuals who might collaborate. A new venture begins as a conversation long before it becomes a company. This is how opportunity actually moves through the world. Quietly, person to person, through relationships that already exist. And because of this, the people who accumulate wealth often do something that looks very different from traditional financial advice. They invest time not only in money, but in people. They understand that relationships are not simply social. They are economic. Every network contains information. Every network contains insight. Every network contains access to people solving interesting problems. And sometimes, inside those networks, an idea appears that changes everything. This is why many wealthy individuals spend enormous energy cultivating relationships. Not superficial connections. Not large numbers of acquaintances. But strong relationships built on trust, competence, and shared ambition. Because trust accelerates opportunity. When trust exists, people share ideas earlier. They share resources faster. They introduce others more willingly. And over time, this creates something powerful. An environment where opportunities collide. Imagine a room filled with ambitious thinkers, entrepreneurs, investors, creators, builders. Each person carries ideas. Each person carries experience. Each person carries access to different information. When these people interact regularly, something fascinating begins to happen. Ideas start colliding. One person mentions a problem. Another person knows someone solving it. Another person has capital. Another person has technology. And suddenly, a new opportunity begins forming. No formal announcement. No advertisement. Just a collision of ideas between trusted individuals. This is the quiet engine behind many successful ventures. And the environments where these collisions occur repeatedly often become incredibly wealthy ecosystems. Certain cities become hubs for innovation. Certain communities become hubs for investing. Certain professional circles become hubs for opportunity. The reason is simple. Dense networks accelerate the movement of ideas. And when ideas move quickly between talented people, new possibilities appear constantly. This is why geography has historically played such an important role in wealth creation. Think about technology hubs, financial centers, creative capitals. These environments gather ambitious individuals into the same space, which increases the frequency of opportunity collisions. But today, something interesting has happened. Technology has expanded the concept of networks beyond physical geography. Digital platforms allow people with shared interests and ambitions to connect across continents. A creator in one country collaborates with a developer in another. An investor discovers a founder halfway across the world. An idea spreads through online communities and transforms into a global project. In many ways, networks have become larger and more fluid than ever before. But the principle remains exactly the same. Opportunity travels through people. And people share opportunities with individuals they trust. This is where the concept of social capital becomes extremely important. Social capital is the value created by relationships. It is the trust you build, the credibility you establish, the reliability people associate with your name. Unlike financial capital, social capital cannot be transferred instantly. It is built slowly through consistent behavior, through contribution, through reputation, and over time, social capital begins producing something extraordinary. Access. Access to conversations. Access to opportunities. Access to people solving meaningful problems. Once access exists, financial opportunities begin appearing naturally. Not because someone demanded them, but because people trust the relationship. Now pause for a moment and think about your own environment. Consider the conversations you have regularly, the people you spend the most time with, the ideas that circulate inside those conversations. Because environments shape thinking, and thinking shapes outcomes. If you spend most of your time inside environments where people discuss survival, you will naturally think about survival. If you spend time inside environments where people discuss growth, you begin thinking about expansion. And if you spend time inside environments where people build systems, invest in ideas, and pursue opportunity, your perspective begins shifting toward those possibilities as well. This does not mean abandoning existing relationships, but it does mean becoming aware of how environments influence financial thinking. Because networks quietly shape what we believe is possible. They shape what opportunities we notice. They shape the types of risks we consider reasonable. They shape the ambitions we allow ourselves to imagine. Now consider a simple reflection. Think about the 5 people you spend the most time speaking with. The 5 individuals closest to your everyday conversations. Ask yourself something honestly. Who are the 5 people closest to your financial thinking? Are they builders? Are they investors? Are they thinkers who discuss opportunity? Or are most conversations focused on limitations, complaints, survival? This question is not about judgment. It is about awareness. Because environments influence direction, and direction determines outcomes. The people who build wealth often spend years intentionally placing themselves inside environments where ideas move quickly, where ambition is normal, where conversations explore possibility instead of limitation. And once they enter those environments, their networks begin expanding naturally. Trust forms. Opportunities appear. And slowly, their financial world becomes connected to a wider ecosystem of builders, thinkers, and investors. But here is something even more interesting. Even networks are not the deepest layer behind wealth. Networks determine access. But access alone does not determine who acts. 2 people can receive the same opportunity. One moves forward. The other hesitates. One sees possibility. The other sees risk. One believes they belong in that environment. The other quietly doubts themselves. Which means the deepest factor shaping financial outcomes is not opportunity itself. It is the identity a person carries into that opportunity. Identity shapes decisions. Identity shapes confidence. Identity shapes whether someone believes they are capable of building something meaningful. And once we begin examining identity, we discover something profound. Many people unconsciously limit their financial lives long before opportunity ever appears. You have now seen how wealth travels through networks. You have seen how trust creates access. You have seen how environments shape thinking and opportunity. But beneath all of these forces lies something even more powerful. The story people carry about who they are, and what kind of success belongs to them. You have learned how networks open doors. Now we must explore the belief system that determines who walks through them. Chapter 8. Your financial identity is quietly controlling your life. By now, you have seen how wealth flows. You have seen how small decisions compound over decades. You have seen how influence, asymmetric opportunities, leverage, and networks can amplify outcomes far beyond ordinary effort. And yet, there is a hidden force quietly controlling everything beneath the surface. A force that determines whether you take action, seize opportunity, or even recognize the possibilities in front of you. That force is identity. Your financial identity, the story you carry about who you are in relation to money, is more powerful than any strategy, system, or opportunity. Most people never notice it. It operates silently, invisibly. It shapes your perception of what is possible. It sets the boundaries of the outcomes you allow yourself to pursue. It determines which opportunities you see as believable and which you dismiss as impossible. Consider this: if you were raised to believe that wealth is rare, that rich people are different or lucky, your mind begins to create invisible walls. Even if an extraordinary opportunity appears in front of you, you may hesitate, sabotage, or rationalize it away. You are protecting the version of yourself that fits the story you have always believed. This is identity protection in action. It is subtle. It is unconscious. It is profoundly influential. Most people think their financial limitations come from lack of skill, lack of knowledge, or bad luck. But the reality is far more psychological. The brain, designed to keep you safe, will defend your current identity relentlessly. It prefers stability over expansion. It prefers the familiar over the unknown. And when it encounters a situation that challenges the identity you've been living with, it triggers hesitation, doubt, and fear. And yet, identity is not fixed. It can be expanded. This is the hidden secret of wealth builders. They normalize larger outcomes for themselves. They begin to imagine results that others might consider impossible. They expect growth. They see opportunity where others see risk. They behave in ways that align with a version of themselves capable of extraordinary outcomes. And here is the remarkable part. Once your identity begins to expand, your financial life begins to expand in parallel. The story you tell yourself about who you are starts guiding your choices. It influences the risks you take. It influences the leverage you pursue. It influences the networks you cultivate. Because every decision you make is filtered through your identity. If your identity believes you belong to a world of scarcity, you unconsciously limit your potential. If your identity believes you belong to a world of abundance, you begin to claim opportunities others overlook. Think about it for a moment. Your financial life expands to the level your identity allows. And the most important step toward changing your financial outcomes is recognizing that identity exists, and that it can be upgraded. This is not just about learning new strategies. This is not just about accumulating knowledge. This is about becoming someone capable of handling greater wealth. Someone who naturally acts in alignment with bigger outcomes. Someone who sees large possibilities as believable and attainable. Identity sets the horizon. Everything else, the opportunities, the leverage, the networks, the compounding, operates inside the boundaries your identity permits. So now, having understood how your beliefs shape your financial reality, it's time to move beyond awareness and into transformation. To go from understanding identity to consciously expanding it. To take the insights you've learned from opportunity, leverage, and networks, and internalize them at the deepest level. Because it is not enough to know how wealth is created. You must first become the person who can create it. You have now seen that your identity quietly directs every decision in your financial life. You have seen how it protects you. You have seen how it can be expanded. And once you expand it, everything else begins to accelerate. You have begun the process of stepping into a new version of yourself. A version capable of claiming larger opportunities and multiplying wealth faster than you imagined possible. You mastered your story. Now, let's talk about applying it to action. Chapter 9. Wealth Builders Design Systems, Not Goals. Up to this point, you have learned a remarkable amount about how wealth is quietly created. You have examined time, influence, asymmetric opportunity, leverage, networks, and identity. You have seen the invisible forces that shape outcomes, forces most people never even consider. And yet, knowing these principles is only the beginning. Because knowledge alone does not produce wealth. Action does. But not all action is equal. Most people are taught to chase goals, to define milestones, to measure progress by the targets they hit. A promotion, a certain income, a specific net worth. And while goals can provide focus and motivation, they are inherently limited. Goals end. They have a finish line. Once the goal is reached, the system that produced it often disappears. And many people find themselves searching for the next milestone, again and again, repeating the same cycles. Wealth builders think differently. They focus not on the finish line, but on the engine that can produce repeated results. They build systems. Systems of wealth. Structures that operate continuously, long after a single decision is made. These systems are multidimensional. They exist in investing. They exist in ownership. They exist in automation. They exist in recurring revenue streams. A single investment can generate compounding returns year after year. A business system can generate income even while the founder sleeps. A digital platform can produce recurring revenue while serving millions of people. The wealthiest individuals often stop thinking about money itself. Instead, they think about the structures that create money. This is a subtle, but profound, shift in perspective. Money becomes a signal, a measurement, an output of a properly designed system. And once your mind begins to operate this way, decisions that once felt urgent, stressful, or risky start to appear as natural steps in a larger structure. You no longer react to individual opportunities. You integrate them into the systems you are building. This approach creates two powerful effects simultaneously. First, it dramatically increases predictability. Once a system is functioning, outcomes become less dependent on luck, timing, or individual effort. Second, it dramatically increases scalability. Because systems can continue producing results far beyond the capacity of a single person. A system multiplies your reach. It multiplies your leverage. It multiplies your identity's impact. And here is the psychological twist that most people miss. The wealthiest people often stop worrying about money entirely. Money is no longer the end goal. It is the byproduct of well-designed structures, repeated behavior, and aligned networks. They focus instead on the design of the system itself. They ask questions like, how can this process run without me? What inputs can I multiply to produce greater output? How can this structure create value for others while growing itself? These questions shift the focus from scarcity to abundance. From chasing individual outcomes to creating repeatable engines of opportunity. And the most important realization here is this. If your systems are properly aligned with your identity, your networks, and your leverage, money flows naturally. It is no longer a struggle. It is no longer dependent on luck. It becomes a logical consequence of structure, discipline, and foresight. Now pause for a moment and reflect. Where in your life do you rely solely on goals? Where do you chase milestones without creating systems? Where do you treat money as an endpoint instead of a signal? Because awareness of these gaps is the first step toward transformation. Once you begin designing systems rather than chasing goals, your financial life begins to operate on a new plane. It becomes predictable, scalable, and aligned with your highest potential. The actions you take today compound tomorrow. The decisions you make now continue producing results long after you step away. You begin thinking not in months or years, but in decades of compounding growth. And at this stage, you finally begin to understand the secret behind sustained wealth. It is not harder work. It is not luck. It is intentional structure. It is system design. It is understanding the forces of leverage, networks, identity, and compounding, and deliberately arranging them to operate continuously. You have now seen how wealth is generated through systems. You have learned that goals are temporary. You have learned that structures are eternal. And as you internalize this approach, your mindset shifts from chasing money to building engines of value that create money. You have mastered the connection between identity and action. Now it is time to expand the vision even further. Because wealth is not just about money, and freedom is not just about income. It is about designing a life with intention. It is about the long-term impact you create. It is about aligning your decisions with the person you have become. You have built understanding. You have built awareness. Now, let's talk about the final step. Chapter 10. The Ultimate Wealth Shift, Becoming a Wealth Generator. By the time we reach this stage in your journey, you have explored every hidden layer that shapes financial success. You have examined time and compounding. You have explored influence and asymmetric opportunities. You have learned the power of leverage, the force of networks, and the shaping effect of identity. You have seen why systems always outperform goals. And now, it is time to step beyond the mechanics of wealth and into the mindset that allows you to generate it continuously. This is the ultimate wealth shift. Because at some point, wealth stops being the outcome of effort, ambition, or luck. It becomes a byproduct of how someone thinks. It becomes the natural consequence of a mind trained to see and act on opportunities that others overlook. This is the wealth generator mindset. The wealth generator does not wait for luck. They do not wait for the perfect moment. They do not even chase money as a goal. Instead, they perceive the world differently. They see opportunity everywhere, not just in obvious investments or business deals, but in the patterns, relationships, and systems that quietly shape the economy. They see leverage everywhere. They notice where effort can multiply beyond their own labor. They spot systems that can continue producing results long after a decision is made. They understand compounding, not just of money, but of ideas, relationships, and knowledge. And they apply it continuously. Because their identity has evolved. They no longer belong to the small, limited version of themselves that doubts possibility. They operate from a version of themselves that expects scale. They act as someone who belongs in conversations about opportunity, creation, and impact. This is the identity upgrade loop in action. Your identity shifts. Your actions follow. Your environment responds. Your networks expand. And wealth becomes not something you chase, but something you attract. Money is not attracted to effort. It is attracted to clarity. It is attracted to leverage. It is attracted to position. And position is created when you align your thinking, your systems, and your identity. The wealth generator understands that every decision is an input into a larger machine. Every relationship is a channel for opportunity. Every action compounds when positioned correctly. And when you begin to see the world this way, the entire landscape of possibility changes. Challenges that once seemed insurmountable become puzzles. Opportunities that once seemed invisible begin to appear. Risks that once paralyzed you become calculated moves in a larger strategy. Because the wealth generator does not see wealth as money in the bank. They see it as clarity of thought, as control of leverage, as alignment of identity and action. This is the ultimate lesson. Wealth is created at the intersection of mind, system, and environment. It is created by thinking differently, acting intentionally, and positioning yourself to capture outcomes that others ignore. And as this mindset takes root, your life begins to expand naturally. Your financial life, your influence, your networks, and your capacity for impact all begin to grow together. The final shift is simple, yet profound. You stop chasing money. You become a generator. You create value. You build structures. You expand your identity. And wealth flows as a consequence of all these aligned forces. Now pause and reflect for a moment. Are your thoughts generating opportunities? Are your actions creating leverage? Are your systems producing consistent outcomes? Are your networks expanding your reach? And most importantly, does your identity allow you to accept the level of wealth and impact you desire? Because when the answer is yes, you are no longer reacting to life. You are designing it. You are no longer a participant in the financial game. You are a creator. You are a generator. You have mastered the lessons of time, influence, opportunity, leverage, networks, identity, and systems. And now, everything you do compounds toward the life you were capable of imagining, but few ever achieve. This is the final stage of transformation. This is the point where wealth is no longer a goal. It is a reflection of who you are becoming. It is the natural outcome of clarity, leverage, and position. And with this understanding, your financial identity is no longer controlling you. You are controlling it. You are designing your life. You are generating wealth in a way that is aligned with your highest potential. You mastered systems. You mastered identity. You mastered leverage, networks, and opportunity. Now it is time to act. To step into the version of yourself that commands wealth effortlessly. To become a wealth generator. And from this point forward, everything you touch begins to expand, not because of effort alone, but because of the mind, systems, and position you have created. You are no longer chasing wealth. You are generating it. And that is the ultimate shift. This is where the journey ends, and where your real life begins. In closing, if you take one idea from this audiobook, let it be this. Wealth is not simply earned. It is engineered. It emerges from the systems you build, the risks you understand, the networks you enter, and the identity you accept for yourself. Most people spend their lives optimizing effort, working harder, trying to earn more. But the individuals who eventually accumulate real wealth are playing a completely different game. They think in decades instead of months. They build leverage instead of trading time. They pursue asymmetric opportunities instead of guaranteed outcomes. And eventually something fascinating happens. Money stops being something they chase. It becomes something their systems produce. So here is the challenge. Over the next few days, begin observing your financial thinking. Notice your reaction to risk. Notice your reaction to opportunity. Notice whether your decisions prioritize safety or possibility. Because the first step toward wealth is not earning more. It is seeing differently. And once you see the invisible structures behind money, you cannot unsee them. And that moment, when your perspective changes, is often the exact moment a new financial life begins.